Okay, welcome back everyone. We are live again. So before I start with introducing the speaker, I want to remind you that you can ask questions using the Ask Question button. And please always indicate with a plus or remind us whether you want to come on screen. Otherwise, we are losing a lot of time asking everyone if they're interested in that. And also, please don't forget that this talk is recorded. So if you come on screen, you're consenting on that. And also that means there is no reason to worry that you're missing something or that you have to take screenshots, as you can do that afterwards. So our speaker now is Dr. Manuela Macedonia. She studies how gestures create sensorimotor networks that store verbal information and make it resistant against decay. She also develops and tests different environments in which digital coaches embody verbal information and train users in order to make digital training effective from an empirical and neuroscientific point of view. Today, she will talk to us about the enhancing effect of gestures in learning vocabulary as a second language. So please welcome her with a virtual
Hello.
And we are ready to start with your talk.
Okay, thank you very much for your kind presentation, and thank you for to the whole organizing committee for inviting me to deliver this talk today, and for this enormous effort you have put into technology. I really love you, and it's a funny situation for me to give a talk alone, but I will try to do my best. So let's start. With an outline, today's talk, I will talk first about embodiment of second language words by gestures. Then I will go on to briefly present a couple of experiments we conducted with digital trainers, and then I will give you a brief outlook of what I am doing and I will do in the future. So first of all, how things began. 1990, 30 years ago, I finished my training as a linguist. I didn't get any job as a linguist. I thought I would never work as a scientist, and I started training people at University of Linz in Italian, which is my mother language. And I didn't know what I did in the old days, so I just tried things out. And as a linguist, but not as a language teacher. And yes, and the things I did were listening comprehension activities, which you might all know when you study a foreign language. And in the beginning, it might be interesting. After 5 times, you get bored. At the end of the term, you die when you have to listen to the next dialogue. So I was aware of that, and I didn't want to bore my students. And yeah, but why did we work that way in those days? And why are there people who still make only listen and comprehend texts with the expectation that people one day will speak the language? So step back. I was trained as a linguist, and didactics of foreign languages is based on linguistics, of course. So who are the persons who have influenced the whole area and the whole sciences in this area? So language, I was trained and as a linguist, so I learned that language is abstract and that words are symbols for objects and events in the real world. And this came originally from ancient philosophy, but then it was taken again by Descartes, who said, I think, therefore I am. And he brought this dichotomy into the world by saying that we have a body and we have a soul. This was also needed by religion, so it was kept over the centuries. And then in the 20th century, Chomsky came out and said language is very, very simply said. So I know that the audience is quite broad in the conference, so this is why I'm introducing this concept. So language has a lexicon and rules, and I learned that these components were like boxes that you then have to put together if you want to speak the language. So, although in the 18th century there was somebody who had already said you might use your body to learn Latin, and this was Claude François Lisard de Randonviller. And then also in the 20th century, Piaget said that language acquisition is a sensory motor process, but he was not mainstream and he was not working on language and not on language acquisition. So this influence, he did not influence the field at all. So one nice day I decided to make a change in my lessons. And in those days, we were talking about pantomime. And so pantomime, you could not use it easily for everything. But I tried to show the concepts, and in order also to make the lessons less boring. And I observed that gestures I performed enhanced the memory for words in my students. And one nice day, I said to the students, come out of the tables and do it with me. So in the first attempt to make people move during the lessons was this very sentence. Excuse me, where is the place of Spain? Where are the Spanish steps? In Rome, it's a stair. And in Italian, it sounds scusi. And I went down like this. Dove, I made a question mark. Is, I went on my knees. And piazza, di, an arbitrary sign. Spagna, like if I was dancing with using castagnetti. So, and this was the very first beginning. And students looked at me and laughed and said, do we have to repeat that? Are you serious? I said, yes, I'm serious. Come on, do it. So, and we did it all together and we laughed all together. And they repeated all together. And the lesson passed very, very fast. And at the end, I asked the students, by just performing the gestures, what the words were, and they could say the words. And I was quite astonished because I didn't expect it. I just was trying not to bore them with the listening and comprehension activities. So that was just by chance that happened during the lesson. I had absolutely no idea of science and what I was doing. I just did not want to bore my students. And then I used this, let's call it technique, for all my lessons and on different levels of language teaching. And I saw they could also store abstract words, not only concrete words, and they could also store little phrases, and they could put then the phrases together and speak quite easily. So I didn't know what I was doing those days. Remember, it was 1991, 92. There was no literature on that, but I was interested on why. And when writing a book for practitioners, for language teachers, I went to the library and was looking for something on memory, and accidentally I found this book by Wolfgang Klimisch, The Structure of Long-Term Memory. I wanted to explain why gestures help to retain information. So, and in this book, he describes words written 1994, so a long time ago. He describes words in his model, which was a theory. It was not brain-based, because in those days we didn't have functional imaging and these techniques. Word as a network consisting of different components. So I was trained that a word is an abstract entity, that it is it's not tangible, so you cannot touch the word, and it's somewhere there in your mind. And so this was a completely new concept I came across. And complex networks with many components store information in a more complex way and decay less fast. So what I was observing during lessons was that if my students had learned the words with a gesture, house, rabbit, swim, which is more complex than just reading the word or listening to it, that the knowledge decayed less fast. So, and this was a first explanation. Because of the network, because of this complexity, the word decays less fast. And then also a very interesting point in this book, in complex networks, the speed of processing information increases. So as the amount and complexity of integrated knowledge increases. So this is a new, this was to me a new idea, that the complex network with lots of components increases the speed of retrieval. And because we were used to think that the more information you have, like in a computer in those days, the slower the computer becomes. And so we thought the mind would work like this as well, but the other way around was true. And he explains in this book this. And then I could understand for myself, as a first explanation at all, that in the brain, that my students could retrieve the words faster if they had learned them with the gestures. So these 3 points led me through a very, very long path, which was also a difficult path, because in those days this was not mainstream. So I had big troubles with my colleagues because I started working with the gestures. I had big troubles with the institution because I was doing crazy things. So it was not easy to go on this, but I observed that students learned simply better. So what one observes, in science, it's not the truth. So you have to prove it. You have to have numbers on these things. So I went to see Klimesh, and he said, okay, then I know what you mean. You will be right, but you have to prove this, and you have to write a doctoral dissertation on this. So this was what I did, without knowing what would expect me. So I wasted about 400 participants. Sorry, I go back, one step back. I wasted, just to tell you how tough this work was in those days. I wasted participants because I made them learn languages, modern languages, that are that they signed, they had not learned the language, but the problem was they had knowledge which they could connect with the languages. So they signed, they never learned Italian, but they had learned Latin, they had learned French. And in those days, I was not aware of association. So these were my mistakes in those days. You should not repeat them. And after having wasted so many participants, I had the idea one nice day on a mountain. I climbed up the mountain. I was very angry with myself with all this wasted time. And then I thought, well, you create now a language, a corpus, which sounds like Italian, but it's not Italian, so that they cannot connect with French, with Latin, with Spanish, and so on. So, good. This I did. And this was one of the experiments in my doctoral dissertation. I worked the first time with an artificial corpus. And if you see, well, the artificial corpus, if you had a look already at my papers, of course you can say, yes, but the motivation to learn it and so on and so on. Yes, but it's the only way to test in a clean way whether the method you're working with, the way of encoding the information, works for itself or not. So because you define the length of the word, the number of syllables, then you have a good mix, and you can define the familiarity of the words, and so on and so on. So, and this was the very first experiment, which I wrote then this paper on many years later, about 10 years later. No, longer. I didn't have the time to, because I was working thereafter as a postdoc. So I thought, oh, my doctoral dissertation, I will write about it later. So, and if you see, we had in this experiment, we had 2 training conditions. One was audiovisual training with 18 items, and one was with symbolic gestures. And I say symbolic because they were not iconic, and there were some of them were also arbitrary. So, but let's talk about this later, probably, if we have the time to. So we had a training session of 12 repetitions, and it took place on the first day. And on the first day, thereafter, after the 8 repetitions, there was a break, and I tested the retention, and I had about 22% to 10%, let's say like this, retention. So the blue bars are audiovisual learning, reading, and listening. So, and whereas these are the gestures, the red bars are the gestures. So day 1. Day 8, I gave them another input of 4 repetitions only. So, and thereafter there was a break, and then I tested. And you see the bars grow, 64, sorry, about, I think it's 30, I cannot see it properly. And on day 15, I only went there to test them. They were not aware that they would be retested. And you see, the bars, of course, already start to decay. But if you have learned more, you lose less than if you have learned less. So, and after 14 weeks, I retested, and you see this bar does not decay as faster as this one. And after 14 months, I leave it to your interpretation, 10% about towards about 115%. So in this phase, my students, or those students, did not even want to write the test, because they said, we don't know anything anymore. So this was the first experiment on this topic. The first, let's say, not really clean experiment, because nowadays we have to work in a very clean way. This was the very first I conducted. And that gestures enhanced memory was not new, because in the 80s we had memory research working on the enactment effect. And this, a pioneer was Johannes Engelkamp, and Engelkamp and Krumnacher wrote 1980 a paper in which they described that if you perform the action to the word, you will retain the word better. So then they observed that if the subject performs, this was another group, performs the gesture, the subject retains it even better. So the point was that this knowledge was memory. We were working in those days in boxes. You had people working on language, and you had people working on memory, and you had people working on teaching. So, and there was no interconnection. And the bad thing was we didn't have any internet. So nowadays, if you make a search and you use the right keywords, you will get a lot of connections between the disciplines, among the disciplines. But in those days, you did not. You just had your journals you would cite, and your libraries. You would go there and look for books. So this was the really bad side of those days in science. So this knowledge of that gestures enhance memory for words was not there. And they explained it in those days with about 4 points, on about 4 points. So they said there is a motor trace in memory. There is, you remember the words better, because if you have to perform the gesture, you need a higher attention. Then another theory, you use a kinetic image. So you've got motor imagery, which enhances learning. And also the complexity of multisensory information makes the difference between having learned a word with a gesture or having learned the word only by reading it or listening to it, or both. So, and I wrote in my papers, I always take these 4 points together, and I say they don't mutually exclude each other. You have a motor trace, you have, of course, higher attention, you have an image, a kinetic image, and you have a lot of multisensory information, and all these aspects, of course, contribute to the memory enhancement. So my question in those days was, is there a motor trace in words? And is the information really so complex? And another question was, are they stored in structures of procedural memory? But my main point was always, I want to see whether there is a motor trace in the words, in the foreign words you have learned with the gestures. So my hypothesis was, if you hear, if you see, if you speak the words, if you touch things, if you move, if you grasp, then you will have the words, and you will also speak. And you will also speak faster. In order to prove this, I used the mouse I should not have. So in order to prove this, I had to go there where they had brain imaging. And I had the big luck then I was taken at the MPI in Leipzig by, I was allowed to join the group of Angela Friederici. And this is the MPI. When I went there was only this building. These buildings were not there. For those of you who work there now, this was not there. We had only this tomograph and this building. And I lived here. So I went from and to, and it was a very challenging time. I've described it in a book with many sleepless nights. And Angela Friederici said, yes, it could be that there is a motor trace in words in second language if you learn them with gestures. But gestures help because you have motor information. So any kind of motor information might help. So you don't need to make the gesture, roof and rabbit and swim, but it could also be that you retain as much information if you go rabbit and house and swim, because this is also motor information. And the first experiment I conducted there was an experiment with 33 young adults, and they had to learn lots of words this time. We had really an intensive training, really tough training. I'm very grateful to my subjects. They didn't leave the experiment, and they left me then collect the data. 92 concrete words of VMI. This was the new artificial corpus I created, which is much, much cleaner than the corpus I created for my doctoral dissertation. And so we had two learning conditions. One condition was with iconic gestures, so gestures that represent the content. And the other was with meaningless gestures, as I showed you before. And we trained the subject for 4 days, and then we had a follow-up testing on day 60. And just very briefly, you see, after day one, after we tested the day after the training, we had a retention. Well, the yellow bars are with the gestures, with the iconic gestures, and the blue ones are with the meaningless gestures. And you see, we have, of course, a superiority of the iconic gestures all the time. And that does not mean that you perform meaningless gestures, you don't learn. No, you also learn, but you learn significantly less. Oops. Sorry. Sorry. Oh, gosh. So I have to use this and not that. So, and now I wonder if you see, no, you don't see the pointer. So, and the brain imaging showed us that the iconic gestures had significantly more motor activity in premotor cortices, whereas the gestures, the meaningless gestures, activated a network for cognitive control, as you will find in Stroop tasks. What does that mean? If I go roof, okay, that's a roof, and you store it as a roof. And if I play this in the scanner and you hear tetto in Italian, then this matches, this makes sense. But if I go and I say roof, you will ask yourself, oh, is that a roof? No, that's not a roof. So you suppress some information and you activate this network for cognitive control. So that means we do have an image corresponding to the word we have stored. And this is a proof that if the image does not match, you will suppress this image which is not matching. So we also had other experiments. Oh gosh, I have to hurry up. Other experiments at the Max Planck in the group of Katharina von Kriegstein. This experiment was run by Katja Meyer. And here we made participants, sorry, trying to hurry up, translate after the training in the scanner.
You don't have to, like,
sorry?
You don't have to hurry too much. If it's just like a few minutes over time, that's okay.
Thank you, sorry. So just a brief glance at this image. You will see we do have, when subjects translated in the scanner, this was a multivariate pattern analysis, we do have activity even while they translate. So that is to say, if you learn words, novel words, in a language which is not associable, and you store them, if you learn the words with gestures, you will have a sensory motor network which you can activate by listening or reading the words, even also when you translate. So now, I first thought of this talk as a very as a talk only on embodiment, on these things I just have talked about now. But now, in this time, in a time where digitalization becomes more and more important, I just want to briefly give you an overview of my later work. I'm still working in base research, but I also, when I came back to Austria, to the Linz University, I started developing digital coaches that help you, support you to learn foreign languages. So this is one coach. This is Billie, an intelligent agent. For my job, it was not intelligent. It was developed at Bielefeld University by the CITEC group. I don't know, you might know it. And he coached participants through like a human, like, let's say, similarly to what a human could do. Then we had another two coaches. They were integrated in a system to make our Erasmus students coming from all over the world study essentials of German at home. This is quite old work. I started with that, I think, 2013, 14. This was not really, let's say, rewarding for us because we could not test properly. We had online tests, so it was not a clean work. So we didn't have good results on that, just to tell you about it. And then we developed an avatar in augmented reality, our Vara. She's here, and with her we have run 2 experiments. So, and why did I go on with virtual coaches, with virtual trainers? Because they're able to speak, they produce dialogues, they also can tell how to pronounce difficult phonemes. Well, they should be, in fact, capable of everything like a human. But you know, going to the backstage and knowing what work there is behind such a virtual trainer, brings back to reality. But people out there would like to have a mobile with their own virtual coach teaching, I don't know, Chinese or these difficult languages, difficult to ask to me. So, but my focus is still on embodiment of second language, not on commercial products. So we had 4 experiments. First experiment where they give in my experiments, they give second language input and they perform related gestures. And next step will be that they monitor you while you perform the gestures and they give you a feedback like a teacher would do. So if this is roof, the avatar will say, oh, your performance of roof was not really good. You did nothing. So please retry with me and make roof properly. So this will be the feedback we're working on. And there is a practical point in virtual coaches. They're ubiquitous. They are there for you at any time. If you want to learn during the night, you can. And they will know you in one nice day as a user, and they will train you according to your own capacities. So you will have a personalized training. And yeah, and also what is important to me, they will train you according to embodiment principles. So not just how the teacher thinks, but with methods that have been scientifically tested. So what did Billie do? Just briefly, I want to make you see it. So this was the word for hearing. I see you don't hear it. Doesn't work. Doesn't matter. We have to go on. Sorry, but you can read about the study. And we had a few tests just to show you the free recall. Control was audiovisual learning. Human, we had the human doing the same things. They learned better with the agent, but not significantly better. But learning with gestures with both the human and the virtual agent was significantly better than just reading and hearing the words. And we had also follow-up, and again, making gestures with both the human and the virtual trainer was significantly better than just hearing and listening to the words. So this was Billie. Then we had Heidi and John. We had here 72 young adults. We had always the same audiovisual learning, and then observation and gesture. And we had only 1 hour of training, which is too little. I can tell you now, never run an experiment with this kind of things with embodiment with just 1 hour. It doesn't work. And this says everything. You will have a look at the slides if you want, so you can see that was wasted time for us, but we learned a lot. And with Vara, we have this augmented reality with a smartphone mounted on a screen holder. And yes, we had experiments in a museum with people in different ages, and the results were not really good. Well, were not good at all, because the adults, you see, there's a huge range of age, and we saw that the older participants had big difficulties with augmented reality. They got sick and had this kind of problems. And to make a splitting of the results, we didn't have enough participants. So we might collect more data on this. And we're also collecting data in Graz with participants learning with EEG. So we are curious to see how the oscillations will be. And also we might also run functional imaging on the words, always in order to see whether we have activity in procedural memory this time. I want to see more. So, and last but not least, this study is in revision now. I submitted the last revision yesterday, so you might be reading it in the next few weeks. I hope so, at least. We had another kind of embodiment learning by grasping virtual objects in a huge cave. We have here in Linz one of the biggest caves in the world for virtual reality. And the results are in the Ars Electronica Center, and the results were very good for our expectations. We had a very short training for only 1 hour, and participants could hear and read the words, or observe the objects in virtual reality, or grasp the objects. And the overall results are very good. If you grasp the objects, you retain the words. So we also have reaction times, and grasping is the way you can retrieve faster the words. So Klimesh in the old days. So my outlook is I will go on in base research. I'm still working on topics which fascinate me. Is procedural memory involved in learning? So I want to have really a good look at all structures in procedural memory. This would explain why you have a very long retention time of the words you have learned with gestures. And I'm also interested how the periphery responds to embodied second language. And we have run an experiment with functional electromyography, and we're writing the paper now, so it might come out hopefully in the next, 12 months. And these are cooperation with Leipzig, Graz, and Milan. Oops, sorry. Where am I? Here. So I have to use the pointer. And in applied research, I will test on other environments, digital environments. And also an interesting thing would be to make these agents intelligent. But this is a lot of work and a lot of money you need to do this. You know what I'm talking about. So let's see how the world develops. So my vision would be intelligent machines make people learn. So you have embodiment, and all these data coming from all these devices go into a data set. And this is, let's say, the brain of the virtual trainer that personalizes your training and knows you and helps you to, through learning processes, the best technology can. So this work was done with these partners. I'm very grateful about, and I would like to acknowledge for the work I presented today these persons, particularly Claudia Repetto. She is a great colleague. We really work very well together, and but all of them have contributed to this research. And also, especially last but not least, I would like to thank Edanur Aktan, my research assistant, who also made it possible that I work with Prezi. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. That was a great talk. And from what I see in the questions, a lot of people were inspired to implement what they learned here in learning a language themselves. Yeah. And we already have a lot of questions. So I will start with the most popular one by Alexandra Witt, who doesn't want to come on screen. So I will just ask it. Is there any evidence that embodiment is also effective for learning concepts independent of language acquisition?
Well, is there any evidence that it works with any language? Is that the question?
No, that it is also effective for other concepts other than
for other concepts. Yes, I think so. And I'm an editor of a book which came out in March 2020 in German, unfortunately. And we collected, let's say, scientific papers in that book, but also we collected practice papers in mathematics, in other subjects. I mean, these things are not, I mean, these contributions are not scientific contributions. They come from practice. So, but I think if anybody would like to work on that, I think that we can prove that embodiment really supports cognitive processes. And this is, in language, it's quite well proven, but also memory processes in other subjects, yes. No, but there is not a lot of evidence in that. There is some mathematics, but there are a few people working on this because testing is so difficult. You know, depends on the subjects. It depends on other things. So, but we could get in touch if you need any information. I can support you and send you papers also if you want to.
So the next question is by Viviana Lupin. Really fascinating. What would happen if you tried to learn multiple languages using this method? Would there be some kind of inhibition overlap?
Yeah, this is a very good question. Thank you for asking it. I always get this question because everybody would like to have a gesture, roof, and then attached to roof, Italian, French, English, and so on. That would be perfect, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work because in the very moment that I go like this, and you have learned Italian, tetto, then you would get out tetto. So you should have another gesture for French, toi. So you might do this. But then you have to have, in every language, more or less a different inventory of gestures. So I want to say this is the way it works, but it's not absolutely perfect, but it's in the nature of our mind that it doesn't work for every language. I'm sorry, but that would be a good commercial thing to do. Yeah.
Really nice answer. The next question is by Oscar Davy. Sign language would seem to be a similar case where language is understood using gestures that are often explicitly linked to word meaning. Has anyone considered teaching sign language parallel to second language teaching to harness this effect? Is there any data on this?
Yeah. So also very interesting question. So the matter is, if you know sign languages, the matter is that for a sign language, it's a language, whereas what I call voice movement icons, tetto, coniglio, nuotare, these are gestures that accompany a foreign language in order to make the word network more complex, in order to make the words stable in memory, and to retain them for a longer time, and to retrieve them more fast. So this is, there are two different things. The movement you make, tetto, is easy for any teacher to use. So if one thinks, I have to make it like this, or like this, or like this, it will always work for your audience. So whereas if you have to learn first a sign language, which is a language, in the sign language, you've got iconic gestures. So this is, I think, to kill, right? So this you could also do in Italian, uccidere. Why not? But if you have to learn first sign language and then transpose it, you will have to explain peculiarities of the sign language because it's a language. It's not just gestures you make like this. You have to put them in a sensible order, and so on and so on. So moreover, you have got an English sign language, you've got an American sign language, you've got an Australian sign language. Which one should you learn if you want to teach English at school with gestures? So that becomes very, very complicated, and it makes a huge mountain of knowledge before, which should be learned first by the teacher, which the teacher has first to learn before the teacher teaches what is meant to be taught, so which is English, and that would never work. And also, there are dialects in sign languages. So Southern German does not sign like a Northern German. I mean, like a dialect, so small differences. Does not work. No, not really. Not really for the purpose.
Okay, very interesting.
Yeah.
So the next question is by Vanchika, and I'm inviting them on screen as they indicated that they are interesting. So if you're there, please answer the call now. And yeah, let's wait for a little bit. Vanchika, where? Maybe I'll just read the question then until the time. Would sight reading of music serve as a good second language for this study? given that there is a significant sensorimotor involvement without the use of words creating any confounds?
I didn't understand the question. What with music?
Would the reading of music serve as a good second language for this study? Because there is a significant sensorimotor involvement, but you're not using any words. But then I would assume that it's still...
So you listen to music?
Yes,
Why?
because music you can play it, so there is some sensorimotor involvement in music as well.
So you play piano when learning a dialogue in French?
I think that's what they mean, yeah. They still didn't reply there. Whether you could use music instead of
that,
language.
The question is, the sensory motor networks connected with the semantic of the word, right? Let's say tetto, roof. You've got also a kinetic image of a roof. If I say make a roof, you might also do this, or this, this, or this. But if I say make roof, or roof, this is a roof, it doesn't match with the image you have in your mind. So
I think she means if you can use music itself as a language.
Am I audible?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi, I'm sorry, the video is not compatible with my browser at the moment. So what I wanted to ask her was, so we have sight reading in music, right? Where you have notations that you follow. And that is a sort of a language that bypasses the whole vocabulary of a language, because essentially you are reading and responding and expressing like you would in any other language, but you're bypassing the whole word network and the association that you have with the notations is very direct in terms of the embodiment that you execute while you're following the sheet music or the notations and playing out an instrument. So I was just wondering, since we are talking about how gestures can help us learn a language, so I was wondering about this particular language being a good sort of substitute to do that. So if I could have a thoughts on this.
So basically, instead of using another language or a fictional language, to use music.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, reading music per se. I mean, reading and executing.
I'm talking about learning foreign languages. So I know that music is also defined as a language. But look, when you learn music, you learn how long the note is, and you have all these annotations, whatever, and then you play it. So you do something with your motor system, and you know about it, and you hear it. So music learning by playing it is already this very complex sensory motor network you create. Whereas when you learn a foreign language, you only read the word and hear it. And this was the point I started from, that only reading and listening to the words does not help you as much as if you create a large sensory motor network. So you cannot retrieve the words very easily. And once you have learned the list, you also forget it very fast. So I'm just trying to bring sensory motor processes into learning languages. Also the way you do it when you learn your native language. A child grasps. This is why we ran the experiment with the grasping, with the virtual objects. So I'm just trying to bring what our practice in teaching has taken away from natural language learning. I'm trying to bring it in again in order to have learning processes that are more adequate and they are more effective. And yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Sure. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't know what I answered, but this is what I can say.
I was just throwing out an idea into it.
Okay, I'll have to stop the session
Thank you for
because
taking
we
it.
already
Thank you.
went overboard. Thank you for
Sure.
coming, Vanchika. And yeah, so everyone, please don't forget to visit the posters. And yeah, my colleague has already posted the link below, so you can see who presents and where, and you can see them on Zoom. So thank you again for your presentation, Dr. Macedonia. It was very inspiring. And we'll see all of you back at 2:45 with the talk from Anton Sirota that was moved from yesterday. So see you later.
See you, and thank you for inviting me, and all the best to Neurizons. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.